The forest had always called to me in whispers, soft, insistent things that curled around my thoughts like smoke. Tonight, those whispers were screams. I ran. My feet barely touched the ground as I tore through the underbrush, branches clawing at my arms, my face catching in my pale blonde hair until strands ripped free. Behind me, the sounds of the engagement party faded, laughter that had turned cruel, music that had mocked my humiliation, the collective gasp when he'd announced it, when he'd announced her. Not me. Never me. The champagne glass I'd been holding had shattered against the marble floor, and I'd done the only thing my body knew how to do anymore. Run. My mother's voice echoed somewhere in the chaos I'd left behind, calling my name. Emma, Emma, come back. But I couldn't. I couldn't stand there in my pale blue dress, the one I'd chosen because he once said it made my eyes look like morning sky, and watch him slide a ring onto someone else's finger. Watch him smile at her the way he used to smile at me, back when I still believed I was enough. The tree line swallowed me whole. I didn't slow down until my lungs burned and my legs trembled, until the sounds of civilization disappeared entirely, and all that remained was the symphony of the wild, owls calling, creatures rustling in shadows, the distant howl of something that made my blood run cold and hot all at once. I collapsed against an ancient oak, its bark rough against my spine, and finally let myself feel it, the humiliation, the betrayal. 3 years. 3 years of my life poured into a man who looked at me tonight like I was a stranger who'd wandered into his story by mistake. You're too soft, he'd told me once, months ago, when the cracks first started showing. Too gentle. I need someone stronger, someone who can handle my world, and I'd believed him. Believed that my compassion was weakness, that my tendency to cry at wounded animals and stop to help strangers made me inadequate. I'd tried to harden myself, to be what he wanted, but it was like trying to make water into stone. Now, in the darkness of the forest, I wondered why I'd ever tried at all. The temperature dropped suddenly, dramatically. My breath misted in the air, and I wrapped my arms around myself, the thin fabric of my dress doing nothing against the cold. I should go back. Find my car, drive to my apartment and lock myself in, and let the humiliation ferment into something I could eventually survive. But I didn't move. Something kept me rooted to that spot. Something that felt older than reason, more insistent than logic. The forest itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. The normal sounds had stopped. No owls, no rustling, just silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums like water. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not human footsteps. Too deliberate, too measured, moving through the underbrush without disturbing a single leaf. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed harder against the tree, making myself small, invisible. Old instincts from childhood games of hide-and-seek surfaced, absurd and desperate. You shouldn't be here. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and textured like whiskey and smoke. I spun, searching the darkness, but saw nothing except shadows layering upon shadows. The forest isn't safe for humans after dark, the voice continued, closer now, especially not tonight. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat, forced steel into it that I didn't feel. I'm fine. Just needed some air. A low sound rumbled through the darkness. Not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. In a party dress, miles from the nearest road, he stepped into a shaft of moonlight, and my breath simply stopped. I'd never believed in the supernatural. Vampires, werewolves, fae, they were stories, entertainment, metaphors for human darkness. But looking at him, I understood with sudden visceral certainty that I'd been wrong. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that caught the moonlight and threw it back golden, inhuman. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, and he was looking at me like he'd been searching for me his entire life. "You're crying," he said, softer now, and I realized my cheeks were wet. I'd been crying without knowing it. Silent tears that tasted like salt and failure. "I'm fine," I repeated, the lie automatic. He moved closer, each step deliberate, and I should have been afraid. Every rational cell in my body screamed that I should run, that whatever he was, it wasn't human, and therefore wasn't safe. But my feet stayed planted, and when he stopped just inches away, I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "What are you running from?" he asked. The question landed like a physical blow. Not who. What? As if he could see past the surface drama to the deeper truth, that I wasn't just running from my ex-fiancé, but from everything he represented, from a life that had never quite fit, from expectations I could never meet, from the crushing weight of being told over and over that who I was simply wasn't enough. Everything. I whispered. Something flickered in his golden eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. He lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of pale hair from my face. His fingers were warm despite the cold, and where they touched my skin, I felt something electric spark and spread. I know what it's like, he said quietly. To be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. The words broke something open in my chest. Fresh tears welled up, and I hated myself for them, for this weakness I couldn't seem to shake. I'm sorry. I don't even know you. I shouldn't. My name is Sebastian, he interrupted gently. And you're on my land. That should have frightened me, should have sent me running back toward civilization. Instead, I felt something settle, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I'm Emma, I managed. I'm sorry for trespassing. I'll go. Don't. The word was sharp, almost desperate before he softened it. Don't go. Not yet. We stood there in the moonlight, two strangers who felt like something more. And I wondered if I'd actually passed out against that oak tree. If this was a dream my traumatized mind had conjured to escape reality. Because surely this couldn't be real. This impossible man with golden eyes. This electric pull between us. This feeling that despite everything terrible that had happened tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. Why are you really out here? I asked, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. People don't just wander around forests in the middle of the night. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Tonight is complicated. There's a gathering. Important people. Important decisions. He paused, and that not smile turned bitter. I needed to escape them as much as you needed to escape your party. Important decisions. About my future. About who I'm supposed to. He trailed off, jaw tightening. Who I'm supposed to choose. Understanding crashed over me like cold water. An arranged marriage? Something like that. He studied me with an intensity that made my skin flush. Though right now, standing here with you, those expectations feel very far away. A howl split the night, closer than before, answered by others in a chorus that raised every hair on my body. Sebastian's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body going rigid with an alertness that was purely predatory. We need to move, he said, his voice dropping to a tone that demanded obedience. Now, what? Do you trust me? It was an insane question. We'd met minutes ago. He was clearly not human. I knew nothing about him except his name, and that he made my heart race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. Yes, I heard myself say. He grabbed my hand, and the world tilted. We were moving impossibly fast, the forest blurring around us, and I should have been terrified, but instead felt strangely safe. His grip on my hand the only solid thing in a world gone liquid and strange. When we stopped, we were in front of a massive stone structure that seemed to grow directly from the forest floor. Part mansion, part fortress, windows glowing with warm light. What is this place? I breathed. Sebastian's hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and strong. Sanctuary, he said simply. Then, meeting my eyes with an expression I couldn't read. If you'll accept it. Behind us, the howls grew closer, and I realized with creeping certainty that whatever was happening, whatever I'd stumbled into, there was no going back to the life I'd left behind. That girl in the blue dress, crying over a man who never deserved her. She was already gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone I didn't quite recognize yet. Someone who said, yes. Sebastian's expression transformed. Relief and something fiercer. Something that looked almost like triumph. And he pulled me toward the entrance, just as the first massive shapes emerged from the tree line behind us. The door closed between us and the darkness, and I had the distinct feeling I'd just crossed a threshold far more significant than wood and stone. The interior of the fortress was nothing like I expected. Where I'd imagined cold stone and medieval darkness, there was warmth. Rich wooden floors polished to a honey glow, tapestries depicting forests and moons in silver thread, fireplaces crackling in rooms that opened off a central hall like the chambers of a heart. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke and something wild I couldn't name, something that made my pulse quicken. Sebastian hadn't released my hand. We moved through the hall quickly, his body angled slightly in front of mine, protective, and I caught glimpses of people. No, not people, I realized with a jolt, watching us from doorways and corridors. Their eyes tracked our movement with predatory focus, golden and amber and green, glowing faintly in the firelight. Beautiful faces marked by an otherness I was only beginning to comprehend. They were all watching me. Sebastian. A woman's voice cut through the murmuring, sharp as a blade. What have you brought into this house? She emerged from a side room, tall and elegant in a black dress that seemed to absorb light. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing bone structure that could have been carved from marble. Beautiful, but cold. So cold. Victoria, Sebastian said, and his hand tightened around mine. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? Her laugh was brittle. You disappear from your own bonding ceremony, and you return with a human, on tonight of all nights? Her gaze raked over me, assessing and dismissing in one brutal sweep. She reeks of weakness and tears. What could you possibly want with such a fragile thing? The words landed like blows, echoing my ex's assessment so perfectly it stole my breath. Too soft, too gentle, too weak. My hand trembled in Sebastian's grip, and I tried to pull away, shame burning hot in my chest. He wouldn't let go. Careful, Victoria, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You're speaking about someone under my protection. Your protection? She stepped closer, and others emerged from the shadows. Men and women who moved with that same predatory grace, forming a loose circle around us. You have responsibilities, Sebastian. To the pack, to the Alliance. Elena is waiting for you, and her father grows impatient. Elena. The name felt significant, weighted with expectations and politics I didn't understand. I didn't ask for this, Sebastian said, and I heard exhaustion beneath the authority. Any of it. None of us ask, an older man said, stepping forward. He had silver threading through dark hair, scars crossing his weathered face, and eyes that had seen too much. We do what's required for the survival of our people. You know this, boy. Your father knew this. Something flickered across Sebastian's face. Pain, quickly masked. My father is dead, Thomas, and I am not him. The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. I could feel the tension coiling tighter, could see the way bodies shifted, preparing for something. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I wondered wildly if I'd escaped one disaster only to land in something far worse. Perhaps, Victoria said, her voice silk over steel, you should take your guest somewhere more private. Let her rest while you remember who you are. She smiled, showing too many teeth. Before the council arrives and sees what a fool you're making of yourself. Sebastian's jaw clenched, but he nodded once, curtly, and began pulling me toward a staircase that curved up into darkness. The others parted to let us pass, but their eyes never left me, calculating, curious, hostile. I felt exposed in my thin party dress, my bare feet leaving faint bloody prints on the polished wood from my run through the forest. We climbed in silence, floor after floor, until the sounds from below faded, and there was only the creak of old wood and our breathing. Finally, Sebastian pushed open a heavy door and guided me into a room that took my breath away. It was a bedroom, but calling it that felt inadequate. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the forest, moonlight streaming in to illuminate furniture that managed to be both rustic and refined. A massive bed dominated one wall, piled with furs and quilts. A fireplace already burned low and warm. Books lined shelves built into the stone walls, and I saw titles in languages I didn't recognize. This is my room, Sebastian said, finally releasing my hand. Immediately, I felt the absence like cold water. You'll be safe here. Safe from what? I asked, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. Sebastian, what is all this? What are you? He moved to the windows, his back to me, tension visible in every line of his body. For a long moment he didn't speak, then, You really don't know, do you? You didn't come here deliberately. I was running, I said, from a party, from my ex-fiancé. I trailed off, unsure how to explain the desperate need to escape everything my life had become. I just ran, and the forest was there, and then you were there, and... The forest brought you to me, he interrupted softly, turning to face me. In the moonlight, his features seemed even more inhuman, even more beautiful. Do you believe in fate, Emma? I don't know what I believe anymore, I admitted. 3 hours ago, I believed vampires and werewolves were fiction. Now I'm standing in a fortress full of people with glowing eyes who move too fast and smell like forest and wild things, and I'm trying very hard not to completely lose my mind. His mouth quirked into almost a smile. Werewolves, he confirmed. We prefer the term shifters, but yes, that's what we are. What I am. He paused, and something vulnerable crossed his face. I'm the Alpha, the king, by your terms, leader of the largest pack in the Northern Territories. A king. Of course he was. Because apparently my life had decided to become a fairy tale, except the kind where the heroine was completely out of her depth and terrified. And Elena? I forced myself to ask. The daughter of the Southern Alpha, Sebastian said, his voice flattening. Our packs have been, not quite at war, but not at peace. Too many border disputes, too many skirmishes. The council decided a bonding between us would unite the territories, bring stability. He turned back to the window, jaw tight. I have no choice. Everyone has choices, I said, though the words felt hollow. Hadn't I spent 3 years making choices that led nowhere, choosing to stay, to change, to believe I could be enough? Not when hundreds of lives depend on those choices, Sebastian said quietly. Not when refusal means watching my people suffer. I moved closer, drawn by something I didn't understand. Is that why you were in the forest? Trying to escape? Trying to breathe, he corrected. Trying to have one moment of freedom before I committed the rest of my life to someone I don't love, don't even like, for the sake of politics and peace. He looked at me then, and the intensity in his golden eyes made my breath catch. And then you crashed into my life, running from your own cage, and suddenly everything I thought I understood became complicated. I should go, I whispered, even as everything in me screamed to stay. I'm making things worse for you. I don't belong here. Don't you? He moved closer, and we were inches apart now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Tell me, Emma. Tell me you don't feel it too. I did feel it. God help me. I felt it like lightning in my veins, like recognition, like coming home to a place I'd never been. It was insane. Impossible. We'd known each other for less than an hour. And yet... This is crazy, I breathed. Yes, he agreed, and slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he lifted his hand to cup my face. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were still falling. Completely insane, the door burst open. We sprang apart as a young man stumbled in, blood soaking his shirt, his face pale and twisted with pain. 2 others followed, supporting his weight, their expressions grim. Alpha, one of them said urgently. Patrol found him at the western border. He's been poisoned, silver in the bloodstream. Sebastian was across the room in an instant, all tenderness gone, replaced by authority and focus. How long ago? Maybe an hour. He's not healing. Sebastian cursed, low and vicious, and began issuing orders I only half understood. Something about physicians and protocols and securing the borders. The wounded man groaned, and without thinking, I moved forward. Let me help, I said. They all turned to stare at me, Sebastian, the 2 men, even the wounded one through his pain-glazed eyes. Victoria's words echoed in my mind. Weak, fragile, useless. But I'd been a nursing student before I'd dropped out to follow my ex to his new job, before I'd let him convince me my dreams were less important than his career. I still remembered enough. You don't understand what you're offering, Sebastian said carefully. Silver poisoning is... I understand he's in pain and needs help while you wait for your physician. I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I understand basic triage and wound care. Let me do something useful instead of standing here being useless. Something shifted in Sebastian's expression. Surprise, reassessment, and something that might have been respect. He nodded once, sharply. Do what you can. carefully. They laid the wounded man on a couch near the fire, and I knelt beside him, pushing past my fear to focus. His name was Daniel, they told me. Young, maybe early 20s, with kind eyes that were currently clouded with agony. "Hey," I said softly, taking his hand. "I'm Emma. I'm going to help you, okay? Tell me where it hurts most." As I worked, cleaning wounds with supplies they brought me, applying pressure to slow the bleeding, keeping him conscious and talking, I felt the others watching. Sebastian stood close by, ready to intervene but letting me work. The other two men, who introduced themselves as Nathaniel and Cole, exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. "You're good at this," Daniel gasped out between waves of pain. Gentle hands. Gentle. The word my ex had used like an insult. Here, in this moment, it was exactly what was needed. The physician arrived, a stern woman named Margaret, who took over with brisk efficiency, but not before giving me an appraising look that felt less hostile than the others. "You kept him stable," she said. "Well done." As they carried Daniel away for proper treatment, Sebastian touched my elbow gently. "Thank you," he said quietly. You were remarkable." I looked down at my hands, shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, stained with blood that was darker than human blood should be. I just did what needed doing. "Exactly," he said, and there was something in his voice, warmth, admiration, that made me look up. "That's exactly what you did." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall, and Victoria appeared in the doorway, her expression thunderous. Behind her stood a woman I hadn't seen before. Tall, athletic, with honey-colored hair and eyes like chips of ice, beautiful in a way that made my heart sink. "Sebastian," the newcomer said, her voice cool and controlled, "I believe we have unfinished business. Or have you forgotten our bonding ceremony in favor of playing with humans, Elena?" It had to be. Sebastian's hand fell from my elbow, and I felt the distance open between us like a chasm. "I haven't forgotten," he said, and his voice was carefully neutral, all the warmth from moments ago locked away. "Elena, this is Emma. She's a distraction," Elena finished, looking at me the way someone might look at an insect. "A pretty little distraction who wandered where she doesn't belong." She smiled, cold and sharp. "Don't worry, dear. We'll have someone escort you back to wherever you came from. Sebastian and I have important matters to discuss." The dismissal was absolute, final. And standing there in my torn party dress, blood on my hands, surrounded by creatures I didn't understand, I felt exactly as small and insignificant as she intended. But when I looked at Sebastian, I saw something in his eyes that made me straighten my spine. He didn't want me to go, and despite everything, the impossibility, the danger, the absolute insanity of this entire night, I didn't want to leave. "No," I said quietly. The word fell into silence like a stone into still water. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I looked at Sebastian, only at Sebastian, drawing courage from whatever this impossible connection was between us. "I'm not leaving," I said, stronger now. "Not yet." His expression transformed, surprise giving way to something fierce and proud, and he smiled. It was the smile of a king who'd just found his queen. The days that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. Sebastian had defied Elena that night, quietly but firmly, asking her to leave and promising they would discuss their arrangement later. The look on her face had been murderous, but she'd swept from the room with Victoria trailing behind like a dark shadow, leaving threats hanging unspoken in the air. I should have left then, should have asked for a ride back to civilization, back to my apartment and my mundane human problems. Instead, I'd stayed, and Sebastian had given me a guest room down the hall, smaller than his but still beautiful, with windows overlooking the forest and a bathroom stocked with clothes that fit surprisingly well. "Pack members come in all sizes," he'd explained with a small smile. "We keep supplies for guests and newcomers." Now, 3 days later, I was beginning to understand the rhythms of this place, the hierarchy and relationships that governed it like invisible threads. The fortress, they called it Thornhaven, which felt appropriately dramatic, housed the core pack members, maybe 50 people total, though others came and went from the surrounding territories. Most treated me with wary curiosity, keeping their distance but watching constantly. A few, like Margaret the physician and Cole, one of the men who'd helped Daniel, were cautiously friendly. Others, like Victoria and her circle, made their hostility clear. I spent my mornings helping Margaret in the infirmary, a stone-walled room in the lower levels that smelled of herbs and antiseptic. Daniel was recovering slowly, the silver working its way out of his system, and he'd become something like a friend, easy to talk to, with a self-deprecating humor that made the work lighter. "You should see the way that Alpha looks at you," he said one morning, grinning despite the pain that still lingered in his movements. "Like you hung the moon." "He looks at me like a complication," I corrected, changing his bandages with practiced efficiency. My hands had stopped shaking after the first day. "Which I am." "Maybe," Daniel conceded. "But maybe some complications are worth it." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I focused on my work, checking his wounds for signs of infection. The silver had burned deep, leaving marks that would scar even with supernatural healing. Margaret said he was lucky to be alive. "What happened?" I asked. "At the border, I mean. How did you get poisoned?" Daniel's expression darkened. "Ambush. We were running routine patrol when they came out of nowhere. Rogues, maybe, or mercenaries. Someone sending a message." He paused, studying my face. "You don't know much about our world, do you?" "I'm learning," I said, slowly. Very slowly. He laughed, then winced. "Okay, crash course. Shifter Politics 101. Sebastian is Alpha of the Northern Pack, strongest in the region. Elena's father, Gregory, leads the Southern Pack. They've been rivals for decades. Border disputes, resource conflicts, the usual territorial drama. The Council of Elders, which includes representatives from both packs plus the smaller territories, decided a bonding between Sebastian and Elena would unite the packs and bring stability. "A political marriage," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "Exactly. Except Sebastian doesn't want it, and honestly, neither does Elena. She wants power, not partnership. But they both know refusing would likely mean war." Daniel shifted carefully, meeting my eyes. "Then you showed up, and suddenly everything got more complicated." "I didn't mean to." "I know," he interrupted gently. "But intentions don't change reality. You're his mate, Emma. We can all see it. Smell it even." I stared at him. "His what?" "Mate. Fated pair, destined partner, whatever term you want to use. It's rare. But when it happens, it's an alpha finding his true mate." Daniel whistled low. "That changes everything." My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's not, we barely know each other. It's been 3 days. Time doesn't matter to fate," Daniel said simply. "And it doesn't matter to biology either. The bond is already forming. You must feel it." I did feel it. Every time Sebastian entered a room, my awareness sharpened. Every time our eyes met across the dining hall or past each other in corridors, something electric and undeniable sparked between us. I'd catch myself listening for his footsteps, breathing easier when I knew he was near. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "But he's still going through with the bonding," I said quietly. "To Elena, for his pack." Daniel's expression turned sympathetic. "He's trying to do the right thing. Trying to put his people first, even if it destroys him." He paused. "But between you and me, I don't think he'll be able to go through with it. Not now, not after finding you." Before I could respond, the door opened, and Sebastian himself walked in, still wearing training clothes, loose pants and a fitted shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body. His hair was damp with sweat, and there were fresh bruises on his knuckles. "Daniel," he said, nodding to the younger man, then softer. "Emma, just my name." But the way he said it made warmth spread through my chest. "Alpha," Daniel said, grinning knowingly. "Just getting my bandages changed. Emma's got magic hands." Sebastian's eyes darkened, tracking to where my hand still rested on Daniel's shoulder, and something possessive flashed across his face before he controlled it. "I can see that. How's the healing progressing?" We fell into medical discussion. Daniel's recovery timeline, the lingering effects of silver poisoning, Margaret's treatment plan. But I felt Sebastian's awareness on me like heat, constant and consuming. When Daniel finally announced he was tired and needed rest, Sebastian didn't leave. "Walk with me?" he asked. We left the infirmary and climbed the stairs in silence, emerging onto a terrace I hadn't discovered yet. It overlooked the forest, vast and dark and beautiful under afternoon sun. The air was crisp, carrying scents of pine and earth and the promise of autumn. "You've been avoiding me," Sebastian said quietly. "You've been busy," I countered. "Training, meetings, council sessions. I didn't want to be in the way." "You could never be in the way." He moved closer, and we stood side by side at the stone railing, not quite touching. "Emma, He stopped, jaw clenching. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "Then let me make it easier," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice even as my heart cracked. "I'll leave. Today. I'll go back to my life, and you can do what you need to do for your pack without complications. Is that what you want?" The question was barely a whisper, rough with something that sounded like pain. I thought about my apartment, empty and sterile, my job at the bookstore that barely paid rent, my friends who'd slowly drifted away during my relationship, until I'd been left with no one except a man who didn't love me. Going back to that seemed impossible now, like trying to fit into clothes I'd outgrown. "What I want doesn't matter," I said instead. "You have responsibilities, a duty to your people. I understand that. Do you?" He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his golden eyes stole my breath. "Do you understand that every moment I'm away from you feels wrong? That I hear your heartbeat from 3 floors away and know instantly if you're scared or sad or happy? That the thought of bonding with Elena while you exist in the world makes me want to tear this entire fortress apart?" "Sebastian, you're my mate, Emma." The words came out raw, almost desperate. "From the moment I saw you in that forest, crying and brave and so beautiful it hurt, I knew, my wolf knew. Every instinct I have is screaming that you're mine, that I'm yours, that everything else is just noise." Tears burned in my eyes. "Then why are you still planning the bonding ceremony? Why haven't you told the council?" "Because I'm terrified," he admitted. And the vulnerability in his voice broke something in me. "Terrified that if I claim you, if I put you between me and Elena's pack, they'll hurt you to get to me. Terrified that I'm being selfish, choosing my happiness over hundreds of lives. Terrified that—" He stopped, turning away. "That you'll realize what you've gotten into and run." I reached out, my hand finding his, threading our fingers together. His skin was warm, almost hot, and the contact sent sparks racing up my arm. "I'm already in it," I said quietly. "Whatever this is, whatever it means, I'm here. I'm choosing to be here." He turned back sharply, searching my face. "Even knowing what I am, what we all are, you're a shifter, a werewolf, an alpha." I took a breath. "You're also kind and careful and trying so hard to do the right thing that you're tearing yourself apart. You're someone who protected a crying stranger in a forest, who trusts me to care for your injured pack members, who looks at me like I'm precious instead of weak." My voice dropped. "So yes, even knowing, especially knowing." For a long moment we just stood there, hands linked, the forest breathing around us. Then Sebastian raised his free hand to cup my face, the gesture achingly gentle. "I don't deserve you," he said. "That's not your decision to make." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and heat flooded through me. We were crossing lines, I knew, complicated, dangerous lines. But I couldn't bring myself to care. "Emma," he breathed, and leaned in. The kiss was inevitable, soft at first, questioning, his lips warm against mine, then deeper as I responded, as my free hand found his chest and his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer. He tasted like mint and wildness, and kissing him felt like flying and drowning and coming home all at once. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone almost entirely gold. "Mine," he said, rough and possessive. "Yours," I agreed, and felt the truth of it settle into my bones. A door slammed somewhere below, followed by raised voices. Sebastian stiffened, his head turning toward the sound, predatory instincts rising. "The council," he said grimly. "They're early. What does that mean?" "It means things are about to get much more complicated." He pressed one more quick kiss to my forehead, lingering, reluctant. "Stay in your room tonight, please. Let me handle this." "Sebastian, please, Emma, trust me." I wanted to argue, to tell him I wasn't some fragile thing that needed protecting, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Fear, but not for himself. For me. "Okay," I agreed, "but you come find me after. Promise." "I promise." He left, moving with that supernatural speed, and I stood alone on the terrace as the sun began its descent. Below, I could see figures gathering in the courtyard, important-looking people in expensive clothes, their body language radiating authority and judgment. Among them stood Elena, her honey hair gleaming, her expression triumphant, and beside her, Victoria, whose smile promised violence. I should have felt afraid, should have recognized the danger gathering like storm clouds. Instead, I felt oddly calm, centered in a way I'd never been before. Sebastian had kissed me, claimed me. Whatever came next, we would face it together. I went inside and made my way to my room, passing pack members who watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Cole caught my arm gently as I passed. "Emma," he said quietly, "be careful tonight. The council they're not kind to obstacles. I'll be fine," I said, more confidently than I felt. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're braver than you look. Stronger, too. The Alpha chose well." The words warmed me as I continued to my room and closed the door behind me. Through the window, I could see the council members entering the fortress, Sebastian greeting them with formal courtesy that looked nothing like the man who'd kissed me breathless on the terrace. I settled onto the window seat, prepared to wait. What I wasn't prepared for was the knock on my door 2 hours later. "Emma?" A young woman's voice, unfamiliar. "The Alpha requests your presence in the Great Hall." Immediately, my stomach dropped. "Why?" "The council wants to meet you." I opened the door to find a girl maybe 18, her eyes wide and worried. Is that normal?" "No," she admitted. "It's really not. But you have to come. Now." I followed her through corridors that seemed darker than before, more ominous, until we reached massive wooden doors. She pushed them open, and I stepped into a room full of people who looked at me like I was prey. Sebastian stood at the center, his expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes found mine, I saw the apology there. The trap had been sprung. The Great Hall was exactly what its name suggested, vast and imposing, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow, and walls lined with tapestries depicting wolves in various stages of transformation. A massive table dominated the center, carved from a single piece of ancient oak, surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by people who radiated power like heat from a forge. They all turned to look at me as I entered. I'd changed before coming down, traded my borrowed casual clothes for a simple dress in deep green that Margaret had left in my room, along with a note that said only, "Armor comes in many forms." My pale blonde hair was pulled back, my face clean of makeup. I looked young, I knew, vulnerable. Human. But I lifted my chin and walked forward with as much dignity as I could summon. "Ah," said an older man at the head of the table, his silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome before cruelty carved lines into it. "The human. How interesting." "Emma," Sebastian said, his voice carefully controlled. "This is the Council of Elders. They've come to finalize arrangements for the bonding ceremony." His eyes met mine, and I saw the warning there. "They wanted to meet you." "How considerate," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, though I'm not sure why my presence is required for ceremony planning. A woman laughed, sharp and cold. She was beautiful in an austere way, with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of blue ice. "Oh, she has spirit. How delightful." She leaned forward, studying me like a specimen under glass. "Tell me, child, do you understand what you've stumbled into?" "I understand I'm a guest at Thornhaven," I said carefully. "Under the Alpha's protection." "Protection," the silver-haired man repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, Sebastian has always been protective of strays." He smiled, showing teeth. "I am Councilman Harrison. This is Councilwoman Brandt, and of course you know Alpha Gregory and his daughter Elena." My gaze shifted to the man sitting beside Elena. Massive, gray-bearded, with scars crossing his face and hands that looked like they could crush stone. Elena's father. He was watching Sebastian with an expression of barely concealed contempt. "A human," Gregory said, his voice like grinding gravel. "In my day we knew better than to let prey wander freely through our halls." The threat was unmistakable. Several pack members who'd gathered along the walls shifted uncomfortably, and I felt tension coiling tighter in the room. "Emma is a guest," Sebastian said, and something dangerous entered his voice. "She will be treated with respect." "Respect?" Victoria stepped forward from where she'd been lurking in shadows. "Of course she was here. She's been here 3 days and already turned your head from your duties." Made you forget what's at stake. She looked at me with undisguised venom. How much is the Southern Pack paying you to seduce our alpha? To sabotage this alliance? The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. No one's paying me anything. I'm not trying to sabotage. Then why are you still here? Elena interrupted, standing with fluid grace. She looked immaculate in a dress of midnight blue, her honey hair falling in perfect waves. Everything about her screamed refinement, power, belonging. Sebastian offered to have you escorted home days ago, yet you remain, lingering where you don't belong, causing discord. She smiled, cold and sharp. One might wonder at your motivations. I stayed because I stopped, looking at Sebastian. Because he asked me to. Because kissing him felt like breathing. Because leaving felt like tearing off my own skin. Because she's my mate. Sebastian's voice cut through the room like a blade. Silence fell, absolute and crushing. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. What did you say? Harrison asked very quietly. Sebastian moved to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. A statement, a claim. Emma is my true mate. The bond formed the moment we met. You can all sense it. There's no point in pretending otherwise. The room erupted. Council members shouted over each other, pack members murmured in shock, and Gregory rose to his feet with a roar that wasn't entirely human. But I barely heard any of it, focused only on Sebastian's hand finding mine beneath the table's edge, squeezing gently. This is unacceptable, Gregory bellowed. We had an agreement, Sebastian. A contract signed in blood and witnessed by both packs. You cannot simply... I can, Sebastian interrupted, his voice cutting through the chaos with alpha authority that made everyone fall silent. The discovery of a true mate supersedes all political arrangements. It's pack law, written in our oldest codes. You know this. Pack law, written for shifter mates, Elena spat, her composure finally cracking. Not humans. Not weak, pathetic creatures who'll die in a few decades while you live for centuries. You'd throw away everything, our alliance, our peace, our future, for a brief flicker of mortal life? The words landed like physical blows. I'd known, intellectually, that shifters lived longer than humans. But hearing it stated so bluntly, the math of our impossible situation laid bare, made my chest tighten with grief I hadn't yet had time to process. Emma's lifespan is irrelevant, Sebastian said, but I heard the strain in his voice. This was something he'd thought about, worried over. She is mine. That's all that matters. It matters to the 100 pack members who will suffer when war breaks out. Harrison said coldly. It matters to the families who will lose sons and daughters because you chose to follow your heart instead of your duty. He turned his gaze to me, and I saw calculation there, cold and merciless. Tell me, human, are you worth a war? The question hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that love, or whatever this impossible bond was, could justify any cost. But I looked around the room at the faces watching me, at pack members I'd come to know over the past days. Daniel, still recovering from silver poisoning. Margaret, who'd taught me about shifter physiology. Cole and Nathaniel, who'd started treating me like a younger sister. Young people like the girl who'd escorted me here, who'd done nothing to deserve violence. No, I said quietly. No one person is worth a war. Sebastian's hand tightened painfully around mine. Emma. But I'm not the one creating this situation, I continued, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. I looked directly at Gregory. You are. You and this council with your political games and forced marriages. You're willing to sacrifice two people's happiness, their autonomy, for the sake of convenience. I paused. That's not peace. That's just control wearing a different mask. Councilwoman Brandt's eyebrows rose fractionally, surprise, or possibly respect. But Gregory's face darkened to a dangerous red. Careful, little human, he growled. You stand in a room full of predators. It would be unfortunate if something happened to you. The threat was crystal clear. Sebastian moved in front of me, his body radiating menace, and I heard growls rising from the pack members along the walls. Not all of them, but enough. Nathaniel and Cole had moved closer, flanking us, their expressions grim. Touch her, Sebastian said very softly, and I will tear your throat out with my teeth. Council be damned. This is exactly what I warned you about, Victoria said, her voice cutting through the tension. She's made you weak, Sebastian, made you forget who you are, what you owe your people. Your father would be ashamed. I felt Sebastian flinch, the words landing where they were meant to hurt. His father's death was still recent, still raw. I'd learned that much from careful questions over the past days. An ambush, they said. An attack that never should have succeeded. My father, Sebastian said, each word precise and cold, chose his mate over politics. He ruled with strength precisely because he had someone he loved beside him. He would understand this better than any of you. Your father also knew when to compromise, Harrison said. He understood sacrifice. Then let me propose a compromise. Everyone turned to look at Elena, who'd been standing silent and furious during the exchange. Now she stepped forward, her expression calculating. Sebastian claims this human is his mate, she said. Fine, let him prove it. Let him demonstrate that she's worth breaking our alliance, worth the instability and potential bloodshed. She smiled, cold and sharp. Let her survive the gauntlet. The room went deathly quiet. No, Sebastian said immediately. Absolutely not. What's the gauntlet? I asked, though I could guess from the horror on faces around me that it was nothing good. An old tradition, Margaret said from somewhere behind me, her voice tight, a test of worthiness for those who would join a pack from outside. 3 trials designed to prove strength, courage, and loyalty. She paused. It hasn't been invoked in over a century, for good reason. Because most candidates don't survive, Victoria added, barely concealing her satisfaction. Elena shrugged elegantly. If she's truly Sebastian's mate, truly worthy of destroying a political alliance and risking war, then she should be able to prove herself. Pass the 3 trials, earn her place legitimately. She looked directly at me, challenge clear in her eyes. Unless you're too weak? Too afraid? It was a trap. Obviously a trap. The trials would be designed to be impossible for a human, and my death would solve everyone's problems. Sebastian would be free to bond with Elena as planned, the alliance would proceed, and I'd be a tragic footnote. I should have refused. Should have found another way, negotiated different terms. Instead, I heard myself say, I'll do it. Emma, no. Sebastian turned to me, his eyes wild. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. The trials are brutal even for shifters. For a human, I understand, I interrupted, meeting his gaze steadily. I understand that if I don't do this, you'll sacrifice yourself for duty. You'll bond with Elena and hate yourself for it, and your pack will fracture under the weight of your misery. I reached up to touch his face, gentle. Let me fight for us, please. This is insane, he breathed. But I saw the war in his expression, the desperate hope fighting with terror. Is it agreed? Harrison asked, leaning back with a satisfied expression. The human will face the gauntlet. If she survives and succeeds, Sebastian may claim her as mate with the Council's blessing, and will negotiate new terms for peace with the Southern Pack. If she fails, he smiled thinly. Well, the problem resolves itself. And if she's injured? Sebastian demanded. If the trials, then perhaps she wasn't meant to survive, Gregory said with cruel satisfaction. The gauntlet is sacred. Once invoked, it cannot be interfered with, not even by an alpha. Sebastian looked at me, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes, mixed with something fierce and protective and desperate. For a moment I thought he'd refuse, would choose war over risking me. Then he nodded once, sharply. Agreed, but I set the terms of the trials. I choose the challenges. Within traditional bounds, Harrison amended quickly. No interference, no assistance. The human faces them alone. 3 days, Elena said. 3 trials, 3 days, starting tomorrow at dawn. She looked at me with something that might have been pity, or might have been anticipation. I suggest you rest well tonight, Emma. It may be your last peaceful sleep. The council members rose, already discussing logistics and witnesses and traditional protocols. Gregory paused as he passed us, leaning close to Sebastian. You're making a mistake, boy, he said quietly. That human will die screaming, and you'll spend the rest of your long life knowing you could have saved her by simply doing your duty. Then they were gone, sweeping from the great hall with Elena and Victoria trailing behind. And we were left standing in the sudden silence with pack members staring at us in shock and concern. Sebastian pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I can't lose you," he said against my hair. "I just found you. I can't—" "You won't," I promised, hoping desperately that I could keep it. "I'm stronger than I look, than anyone thinks." "I know you are," he said. "But Emma, the trials, they're designed to break even the strongest, and I can't help you. Can't protect you. I have to just watch and—" His voice broke. I pulled back to look at him, this powerful alpha who was coming apart at the seams. "Then help me prepare," I said. 3 days. Teach me everything you can in 3 days. Give me a fighting chance. Something solidified in his expression. Determination replacing despair. He cupped my face in both hands and kissed me, hard and desperate and full of promises. 3 days, he agreed. We'll make it enough. Behind us, Margaret cleared her throat. If you two are done being dramatic, I suggest we adjourn to the training rooms. The human needs to learn how to survive what's coming. She paused, her stern face softening fractionally. And Emma, you're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. Definitely both, I said, trying for humor, despite the fear clawing at my throat. Cole stepped forward, Nathaniel beside him, and I saw determination in their faces. We'll help, Cole said. All of us, the whole pack. She's one of ours now, Nathaniel added, looking at Sebastian. We protect our own. Around the room, heads nodded in agreement. Not everyone, I noticed. Victoria's supporters stayed silent, their expressions hostile. But enough. Enough people willing to stand with us, to help me survive what I'd agreed to. It wasn't until hours later, back in my room with dawn approaching and my body aching from the first brutal training session, that the full weight of what I'd done crashed down on me. I'd agreed to face trials designed to kill me, for the sake of a bond I didn't fully understand with a man I'd known less than a week. It was insane. It was impossible. And lying there in the darkness, listening to the forest breathe beyond my window, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd do it again, would face anything, risk everything, for the chance to choose my own fate instead of having it chosen for me. Tomorrow, the gauntlet would begin. Tonight, I would rest and dream of golden eyes and the taste of freedom. Dawn broke cold and clear, painting the forest in shades of gold and amber that should have been beautiful, but felt ominous instead. I stood in the courtyard, surrounded by what seemed like the entire pack, plus the council members who'd stayed to witness the trials. Someone had provided me with practical clothing, fitted black pants, a long-sleeved shirt, boots that actually fit. My pale blonde hair was braided back tightly, and Margaret had wrapped my hands and wrists with cloth to protect against abrasions. First trial, Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Survival. The human will be released into the deep forest, marked with Hunter's scent. She must evade capture for 6 hours while 3 of our finest trackers hunt her. He smiled thinly. If caught, she fails. If she survives until sunset, she passes. Sebastian stood with the other pack leaders, his face carefully blank, but I could see the tension in every line of his body. We'd spent the past 3 days preparing, teaching me to move quietly through undergrowth, to mask my scent with mud and leaves, to recognize safe places to hide. But we both knew it wasn't enough, not against supernatural hunters with centuries of experience. The hunters, Harrison continued, gesturing to 3 figures who stepped forward. My stomach sank. One was Victoria, her smile predatory and eager. The other 2 were men I didn't recognize, both massive, scarred, moving with the fluid grace of apex predators. This is excessive, Sebastian said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Victoria has a personal grudge. She shouldn't be allowed. The human agreed to face the gauntlet under traditional rules. Gregory interrupted, looking satisfied. We chose the hunters. That's within our rights. Elena stood beside her father, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not quite satisfaction, not quite concern. Something more complicated. 6 hours, Harrison said, pulling out an old pocket watch. Beginning. Now, I ran. The forest swallowed me immediately, and I pushed everything from my mind except survival. Everything Sebastian had taught me clicked into place, running on the balls of my feet to minimize noise, using rocks and streams to break my trail, moving in unpredictable patterns rather than straight lines. Behind me, I heard the hunters release, 3 howls that raised every hair on my body, the sound of pursuit beginning. The first hour was almost manageable. I found a stream and ran through it, scrambling up onto rocks to avoid leaving tracks, doubled back twice, climbed trees to survey my surroundings, used crushed pine needles to mask my scent the way Margaret had shown me. The second hour, I heard them getting closer, voices calling to each other, coordinating their search. Victoria's laugh, high and cruel, promising violence. By the third hour, I was exhausted. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, and I'd scraped my hands raw climbing over fallen logs and through brambles. I found a hollow beneath an ancient tree's roots and crawled inside, pressing myself into the smallest space possible, covering myself with leaves and dirt, and waited. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. I held my breath as someone stopped just feet from my hiding spot. "I can smell your fear, little human," Victoria said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Your heart racing, the sweat on your skin." A pause. "You can't hide from us. We're designed to hunt creatures faster and more cunning than you. This is cruelty, really. Sebastian should have known better than to let you try." I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, fighting the urge to move, to run. Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, but I stayed frozen. "Check the hollow," one of the male hunters called from nearby. My heart stopped. Victoria crouched down, her face appearing at the opening to my hiding spot. Our eyes met, and I saw triumph flash across her features. Then, impossibly, she straightened and called back, "Nothing here, just roots and rot." She walked away. I stayed in that hollow for another hour, shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Victoria had seen me, had me, and she'd let me go. Why? The 4th hour passed in a blur of movement and hiding, my body running on pure adrenaline. The sun tracked across the sky with agonizing slowness, and I began to understand why they'd chosen 6 hours. It was long enough to ensure complete exhaustion, long enough that even supernatural hunters would find their prey eventually through sheer persistence. In the 5th hour, I made a mistake, jumped across a gap between rocks and landed badly, my ankle rolling beneath me. Pain shot up my leg, sharp and incapacitating. I collapsed behind a fallen log, biting back a scream, and knew I couldn't run anymore. The hunters converged on my position within minutes. "There," one of the males said, pointing. "She's injured. Finally." They approached slowly, savoring the victory, and I forced myself to my feet despite the screaming pain in my ankle. If I was going to fail, I'd do it standing. Victoria reached me first, and I saw something complicated in her expression. "You did well," she said quietly. "Better than I expected. Not well enough," I said, trying to keep the despair from my voice. She studied me for a long moment, then glanced at the other hunters. "What's the time?" One of them checked his watch. 45 minutes left. "She lasted this long on a twisted ankle?" Victoria asked. "Impressive, for a human." Then she stepped back. "We'll give her the full 6 hours. Traditional rules state we must hunt. Not that we must catch immediately. We can wait." The male hunters exchanged glances but nodded, and they settled into positions around my hiding spot, effectively trapping me but not touching me, letting the clock run down. When Harrison's voice finally echoed through the forest, "Time. The first trial is complete," I nearly collapsed with relief. Victoria offered me her hand. "Come on, let's get you back before that ankle swells worse." I stared at her, confused. "Why did you help me?" "I didn't help you," she said. "You survived on your own merit. I just didn't make it easier to fail." She paused, something bitter crossing her face. "Sebastian is my alpha. If he's chosen you as mate, if you're willing to face death for him, then perhaps I've been wrong about you." She pulled me to my feet, supporting my weight. "Don't make me regret this." The walk back to Thornhaven was agony, my ankle throbbing with every step. But when we emerged from the tree line and I saw Sebastian's face, the relief, the pride, the love written across it so clearly, the pain faded to background noise. He caught me as my legs gave out, lifting me easily. "You did it," he said, voice rough. "You survived. First trial down. I managed. 2 to go. Margaret took over my care immediately, tisking over the ankle while wrapping it in cool compresses and administering something that dulled the pain. You'll need to stay off it tonight, she said firmly. Let the supernatural healing properties of the territory work on you. Supernatural healing? I asked. Thornhaven sits on old ground, she explained. Ancient magic. It helps even humans recover faster than they normally would. Not as fast as us, but faster than in the mundane world. She paused. You'll need it. The second trial happens tomorrow, and it won't be easier. She was right. The second trial was combat. Not to the death. The council had at least some limits, but to submission. I had to face 3 opponents in succession, holding my own long enough to prove I wouldn't crumble under physical threat. Sebastian had spent hours teaching me to fight, but we both knew it was hopeless. I was human, untrained, facing shifters with supernatural strength and speed. The best I could do was survive, show courage, refuse to quit. The first opponent was young, maybe 20, and he pulled his punches enough that I managed to land a few hits before he put me on the ground. The second was harder, faster, and I tasted blood before I finally yielded. The third was Cole, and I saw apology in his eyes as he came at me, but he didn't hold back as much as the others. I lasted 90 seconds before my body simply gave out, but I got back up. Every time they knocked me down, I stood again, until even Gregory was watching with something that might have been grudging respect. Enough, Harrison finally called. She's proven her courage. The second trial is past. I could barely walk as Margaret led me away. My body one massive bruise. Sebastian tried to follow, but the council stopped him. Traditional rules meant no contact between trials, no comfort or assistance. That night, alone in my room, I broke down. Let myself cry from pain and exhaustion and fear of what came next. The third trial, the final test. And no one would tell me what it was. Dawn came too quickly. I limped into the courtyard, every muscle screaming, to find the entire pack assembled again. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Heavier, more solemn. In the center of the courtyard stood a young girl, maybe 7 years old, with dark curly hair and enormous eyes. She was crying silently, and my heart clenched. Third trial, Harrison announced. Loyalty, compassion, the qualities that make a true pack member. He gestured to the child. This is Lily, orphaned in the recent border attacks, traumatized and unable to shift. She's been deemed unsuitable for pack life. Horror crawled up my spine. What does that mean? It means she's to be sent away, Gregory said coldly, to human foster care, where she'll grow up never knowing her heritage, never understanding what she is. He smiled without warmth. Unless you can reach her, get her to shift, to embrace her wolf. You have until sunset. She's a child, I said, anger burning through exhaustion. A traumatized child. You can't just... We can, Victoria interrupted, but her voice was strained. It's pack law. Cubs who can't shift by age 7, who show weakness, are removed before they endanger others. She looked at Lily with something almost like pain. It's brutal, but it's survival. I looked at Sebastian, desperate for him to intervene, but he shook his head fractionally. The council's rules, the gauntlet. He couldn't interfere. I was on my own. I approached Lily slowly, ignoring the pain in my body, and crouched down to her level. Hi, I said softly. I'm Emma. What's your name? She didn't answer, just stared at me with those huge, terrified eyes. Lily. I tried. That's a beautiful name. Like the flower. Nothing. I tried everything over the next hours. Talking, playing games, offering food and comfort. She responded to nothing, locked in her trauma, and I felt desperation rising. This child, this innocent, terrified child, was going to be ripped from everything she knew because she couldn't perform on command. It was wrong. Fundamentally, cruelly wrong. As afternoon faded toward evening, I sat beside her on the ground, my own exhaustion making it hard to think. I don't know what happened to you, I said quietly. I don't know what you saw or what you lost, but I know what it's like to feel broken. To feel like you're not enough, like you'll never measure up to what everyone expects. Lily's eyes flickered toward me. For a long time, I let people tell me I was too soft, too weak, too gentle. I tried to be harder, stronger, someone else entirely. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But you know what? The soft parts of me, the gentle parts, those are what brought me here. Those are what made Sebastian see me, made people like Margaret and Cole accept me. I reached out slowly, offering my hand. Your wolf isn't hiding because you're weak, Lily. It's hiding because it's trying to protect you. Because you're scared and hurting, and it thinks staying hidden keeps you safe. A tear rolled down her cheek. But you're not alone anymore, I continued. You have a whole pack here who wants you to stay, who wants to help you heal, including me. I smiled, genuine despite my exhaustion. So maybe you could let your wolf know it's okay to come out? That we'll keep you safe together? For a long moment, nothing happened. The sun touched the horizon, and I saw Harrison reaching for his pocket watch. Then Lily's hand found mine, small and trusting, and she began to glow. The shift was beautiful, soft gold light enveloping her as her body changed, becoming a small gray wolf with those same enormous eyes. She stumbled on 4 legs, uncertain, and I caught her, holding her steady. Around the courtyard, pack members exhaled in relief. Margaret was crying openly, and even Cole looked suspiciously misty. Lily shifted back, collapsing into my arms, and I held her as she sobbed, not from fear this time, but from release. From finally letting go of whatever had been holding her trapped. You did it, I whispered. You were so brave. Harrison stepped forward, and I braced for some new challenge, some technicality that would invalidate what had just happened. Instead, he inclined his head slightly. The 3rd trial is passed, he said. The gauntlet is complete. Emma has proven herself worthy of pack membership. He paused, looking at Sebastian. The council recognizes her as your true mate, Alpha. The bonding may proceed with our blessing. The courtyard erupted in cheers. Some genuine, some grudging, but enough. Enough celebration that the victory felt real. Sebastian crossed the space between us in seconds, pulling both me and Lily into his arms. You did it, he said, voice thick with emotion. My brave, impossible mate. You did it. We did it, I corrected, looking at Lily, who was already falling asleep against my shoulder. All of us. The days that followed blurred together in preparations. Not for war, as I'd feared, but for celebration. The bonding ceremony was set for the full moon, 3 weeks away, giving time for negotiations between the packs, for Elena to return home with her father. She'd looked at me before leaving with an expression I still couldn't read. Respect, maybe, or regret for what might have been. For me to truly begin learning what it meant to be part of this world. Victoria apologized, stiffly, but sincerely. You're stronger than you look, she said. The Alpha chose well. Margaret became something like a mother figure, teaching me pack history and traditions. Cole and Nathaniel appointed themselves my unofficial guards, though mostly they just gave me grief and made me laugh. Daniel recovered fully and claimed credit for helping me survive, which wasn't entirely wrong, and Lily stayed with me, sleeping in my room those first weeks, slowly healing from her trauma. She called me Emma Mom once, then blushed and tried to take it back, but I'd held her close and told her it was perfect. The bonding ceremony itself was beautiful, held in a clearing deep in the forest, under the full moon, with the entire pack bearing witness. Sebastian and I spoke vows older than memory, marking each other with symbols that meant forever in shifter culture. And when he kissed me, I felt the bond settle completely. A golden thread tying us together across whatever distance might ever separate us. My mate, he said, voice full of wonder. My queen. Your partner, I corrected, smiling. Your equal. That too, he agreed, and kissed me again. The celebration lasted until dawn, pack members dancing and singing and welcoming me fully into their midst. When we finally retreated to Sebastian's room, our room now, exhausted and happy, I stood at the window looking out at the forest that had once seemed so foreign and frightening. No regrets? Sebastian asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I thought about my old life, the apartment I'd never returned to, the job I'd called to quit, the ex who'd probably never even noticed I was gone. Thought about who I'd been that night in my blue dress, running blindly from humiliation. She felt like a stranger now, someone I'd been but would never be again. Not a single one, I said, turning in his arms to face him. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. With me? With the pack, I corrected, teasing, then softer. With you. With our family. As if summoned by the word, a knock sounded at the door. Lily's voice called out, uncertain. Emma, are you awake? I had a nightmare. Sebastian groaned good-naturedly, but I was already moving to open the door, pulling the little girl into a hug. Come on, I said. We'll make hot chocolate and you can tell me about it. At dawn? Sebastian asked, but he was already pulling on clothes, accepting this new reality with grace. At dawn, I confirmed. That's what family does. We made our way down to the kitchens, collecting Cole and Margaret and Nathaniel along the way, until the whole group was gathered around the massive table, drinking hot chocolate and listening to Lily's increasingly dramatic retelling of her nightmare. Dawn light filtered through the windows, painting everything gold, and I looked around at these people, my people now, and felt something settle deep in my chest. I'd run into the forest to escape a life that never fit, and I'd found a home. Not despite my softness, my gentleness, my compassionate heart, but because of it. Those qualities that my ex had called weaknesses had been exactly what this pack needed. What Sebastian needed. What Lily needed. I wasn't too soft for this world. I was exactly soft enough. What are you thinking about? Sebastian asked quietly, his hand finding mine under the table. That I'm grateful, I said. For the forest. For that night. For being brave enough to run toward something instead of just away. I'm grateful too, he said, lifting my hand to kiss my knuckles. Every day. For the rest of my very long life, our very long life, Margaret interrupted, grinning. Did we not mention? Mates of shifters tend to live extended lifespans. Something about the bond, the proximity to our magic. You won't be immortal, but you'll have centuries together. I stared at her, then at Sebastian, who had the grace to look sheepish. I was going to tell you, he said, eventually. Didn't want to overwhelm you. Centuries, I repeated, testing the word, with you, with all of you. Is that okay? Lily asked, worried. I pulled her close, then reached for Sebastian's hand again, looking around at the faces of my pack, my family. It's more than okay, I said. It's perfect. Outside, the sun cleared the horizon, spilling light across Thornhaven and the forest beyond. A new day. A new life. A new Emma who'd learned that running away could sometimes mean running toward exactly where you needed to be. And I'd never been happier.